Hello and welcome to Power Reflections, a proud member of the Duff Network where we reflect on Wildbow's most runaway work as it releases. I'm Ruben Morehouse.
And I'm Elliot Diebold.
And we are coming at you live in the Discord, as we do every week. Yeah, no further comments needed. So this week we are discussing In Absentia 21.13 only. One other chapter has come out, but came out while I was at a wedding and didn't have time to read it. So
it was after our
13 today.
It was after our sort of arbitrary deadline that we've imposed, mostly for our own sanity. But I guess on that note,
speaking of being at weddings,
we'll be talking about 21.14 next week. But when I say we, I mean the royal we, because Ruben is abandoning me.
Yeah, for 2 whole weeks, I'm going to be off in Nepal, not thinking about podcasts.
So I will be getting joined by Jenny and Malia for the next 2 weeks. So you'll get to hear their hot takes on 21.14 and the following chapters. For those of you who listen live, the recording times are moving around a bit because we have to be more understanding of American schedules.
More US focused, yeah.
So keep an eye on the if you're following live, the Discord events are all up to date and all that, so that'll tell you when it is.
Great. Well, without any further ado, let's get into it, shall we? 21.13, we're in Verona's perspective here. Verona and Avery are saying goodbye to Kelsey and preparing to continue their journey to Autumnland. Yeah,
and I just wanted to open this with, like, there's, the moment where Kelsey's like, Snowdrop, you take care of them, and Snowdrop's, says in her way, like, I'm fucking going to do that forever. And I just, I keep finding myself really just enjoying the Kelsey Snowdrop interactions in a way. I'm not even really sure why, but it's just, it always just, it just feels like so good for both of them, the way that they work off each other. I don't know. It kind of makes sense, really, that, like, as a parent, especially a parent who has neglected their child at times, knowing that they have, like, this buddy who's literally tied to them for life and will do anything for them all the time. You're obviously going to like that person. But then also most parents-in-law are, like, awful. So I don't know, maybe that's not true. Yeah, I don't know. I just, there's something about, like, Kelsey and Snowdrop's interactions that always just make, like, just are so nice.
Kelsey is really, I think, a bit of a sleeper, hilarious character sometimes, because there's this bit that I almost kind of skimmed over in my head the first time I read the chapter, but Kelsey mentions that she's dealt with Sheridan being a pain in the tits every step of the way, and it just kind of almost passes without comment. And I was just kind of like, oh, so that's where Sheridan gets it. Kind of must be. It just was very interesting to me that Kelsey has these little moments that are so fun.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like, I've not been watching. That's the sort of thing I really want to watch for on a reread now, is, like, I guess Kelsey having these goblin moments. Because you're right. Like, we've talked at length the last handful of arcs about how much you can see Connor in, all his kids, but particularly Avery.
Yeah.
And maybe we've been sleeping on, like, Kelsey having a bit of a goblin tour that you can see bits and pieces in the others from, like, maybe Declan and Sheridan. And maybe that explains why she and Snow are such an interesting pairing. She's got a bit of goblin in her too.
Yeah. Good point.
I mean, the other thing, actually, that this makes me think of is, so, like, Sheridan wasn't in a great place when this story started, and is maybe saying, but, she's not really been particularly body positive about herself. She hasn't really had a life goal. She's not been in a great place. She sort of had the podcasting recently and stuff, but, like, I don't know. Have we seen Kelsey worry about it too much? Like, I'm thinking of when Connor kind of dismissed the concerns about Declan, because Connor was like, he'll get good, boys are just like that when they're little. I wonder how much teenage Kelsey was maybe a bit like Sheridan, and that maybe she's not as worried about some aspects of Sheridan because of that. So, I don't know. I might have stretched it way too far, but yeah.
Yeah. I wonder. Yeah, no, it's an interesting thought. Something to pay attention to, I suppose. We can keep an eye on Kelsey and see if it tracks. because yeah, Kelsey kind of has slipped into the background a little bit with Connor being the main Avery parent focus
Yeah,
recently, at least. But yeah,
maybe that's why. Maybe that's where Avery gets it from. Um,
yeah,
uh, I guess like, and speaking of, like, after she describes Sheridan as being a pain in the tits, she then also she's also like, yeah, and Avery is like a little bit, and Avery pushes her to finish that sentence, and she first says like she's disinclined to reach out, um, which like my gut instinct was sort of like, that seems a bit harsh to say that to Avery, like,
mm,
you know, given how this story started. Um, but I can kind of see, I guess, from Kelsey's perspective, a bit of like that is just almost that is what Avery was like, and you know, it was maybe it was Kelsey and Connor's fault that they let it get far enough that you know Avery ended up where she did. But it's like, I guess it's a fair observation that Avery was like that, and they needed to do. Well, it's not necessarily a. I don't think it was Kelsey necessarily blaming Avery so much as like just making an observation that that's what Avery's like, because
mm,
she also says, as well as being disinclined to reach out, she also mentions being a little bit too self-sufficient. And I think that's probably the part where it crosses over into a bit more accusatory, because I think that that's a fair sort of, from Kelsey's perspective, criticism of how Avery has been with her family in in the recent like 7 arcs or whatever. Like Avery, you know, has sort of been neglecting her family. We used to talk about that a lot when she was based in Thunder Bay full time. Um, and you know, now she is really still keeping them in a distance, even though they're like awareing half the family and stuff. Like, uh, I don't know. I think it's really interesting to sort of see how Kelsey is juggling, I guess, this like the amount of responsibility that's split between the two of them for how Avery, you know, isn't necessarily sharing everything with Kelsey.
mm, yeah, yeah. As as Frank in chat put it, Avery did make a game of only talking for one word responses. Like, you
Yeah,
know, I don't know. I think you're right that it's a little bit unfair, but it's not totally wrong.
Yeah, but I guess it's interesting to view it not just in the lens of what she was saying about Avery at the start of the story, but Avery now, because Avery
Yeah,
is
true.
like the self-sufficient part really feels like it's describing current Avery, which is where you know
Yes, yes.
Avery's moved on beyond just being her daughter. She's bordering on being the head of the family. Um,
Yeah.
and she does often kind of get forced to not, I don't know, give her family first billing because you know she's trying to fucking save the province and shit. Um, so yeah, like I guess it's interesting to sort of see how that problem Avery had of, you know, that made her weak and isolated and alone. There
Mm,
is maybe sort of rearing itself in a different flavor now that she's kind of in a good place and on top.
yeah. Yeah. I wonder, like, you know, the other side of it is just like, obviously they're pretty fucking busy right now.
Yeah,
Like, it's fairly normal. I don't know.
but I guess that's kind of the thing. Is I'm almost like Avery is this arrivals and departures person. She wants these networks. She wants to be talking to everyone. I don't think you can be that kind of maybe it's just me, but like I don't think you can be that kind of person without some people having to like fall back a bit, or like you know if you have lots of medium friends, you don't have a hand. You can't have as many super close friends, right?
Mm,
Which would usually be like your family in this sort of case, I guess. Like, you know, Avery's only got so much time in the world that she can spend with all these people, and so time being given to other people is time that kind of is getting taken away from her
yeah,
family
yeah,
through a lens, if that makes
for
sense. So
sure.
like I guess that's sort of what I feel like I'm getting at is it's like the Avery who's now really well connected and talking to everyone is in her own way kind of distancing herself through not being as close to certain groups or something. I don't know.
Mm,
Yeah,
yeah.
as Izza did it. It's basically the classic struggling to balance your civilian life with being a superhero.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, interesting.
Also, I don't know. I guess speaking of like Kelsey and stuff, there's like the moment where Verona kind of strongly suggests she go hang out with Macaulay for a bit and teach her some basics. You know,
Some basic being a human stuff.
yeah. And I just remember because the moment where Kelsey and where Kelsey mothered Macaulay a few weeks ago was one of those like little moments where it was like, oh, that's good for both of them. And I like sort of seeing the follow through here of Verona having processed the same thing and thinking like, okay, let's like build on that and tell Kelsey to like try and do some more of it, but warn her not to overdo it.
Yeah.
Like, oh, sorry. Actually,
Good
speaking
warning.
of, I've been meaning to bring this up for a bit now. Just speaking of parents not teaching you something basic.
Was this a story about your own parents, Elliot?
Sort of. So this has turned into a bit of a discussion topic around a lot of groups of people in my life right now, because basically I came across this tweet of someone saying, I can't believe I'm 25 and I only just found out that you're meant to let conditioner like sit in your hair for 2 to 5 minutes before rinsing it out.
Mm.
And that was surprising to me as a 30-year-old because I learnt this fact from that tweet. But then everyone I'm talking, apparently this was just common knowledge. Is this like, so I guess I'm asking you in the chat, is there anyone else who didn't know this?
I'm curious what chat has to say.
Because I always put conditioner in and then just immediately rinse it out, the same as shampoo.
No, I think you're meant to have it, massage it in there for a bit,
Okay, now what Jaso just said, I do want to come back to because that's come up a lot. But like,
The label has instructions. Yeah, the label also says to rinse and repeat, and everyone knows that's just a marketing scam.
But who reads the conditioner? This was because this is something a lot of people have said to me. They're like, the label to who reads the instructions on conditioner?
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, well, yeah, not me, but like, I don't like. You don't need the instruction. I mean, clearly I did because I was doing it wrong, but like, I didn't think I did.
How long are you meant to let it sit there? I'm
2 to 5 minutes.
Okay, that is probably longer than I do it, but whatever.
I guess like one thing that really irritated me is I got a lot of comments from one of my sister's friends who was like, what else? Well, because I was like, I've never read the labels. Why would I read the labels? And they're like, what else do you do in the shower? And I was putting my foot down there because I'm like, how boring are you as a person that you have to stand in the shower for 5 minutes and you run out of things to do?
Yeah, you think about random things, obviously. It's the purest time for the expression of your thoughts. Everyone knows that.
Yeah, it's like Imagination City. So
yeah,
I was like, I was not taking that shit. But I guess like just overall, I was just like...
So the two things you can do in the shower are, one, imagine things, or two, pretend you're a waterbender and have water shoot off parts of your body. There's only two things you do in the shower. Well, okay, you could do... I guess that is kind of an imagination thing.
But yeah, I don't know. I guess this was just one of those things because then, like, I kept asking people, okay, well, like, when did you learn that you were meant to let the conditioner, like, soak in or whatever? And people are like, well, I guess I've just always known it. And so then I eventually got back to the point where, like, well, I'm going to blame my parents for this and not me because nobody can seemingly remember when they learned this, which suggests to me that they didn't learn. Wait, they were taught. I don't know. Anyway, so just for the last like 3 weeks, I've had to completely adjust my shower schedule that, has been set in stone for like 15 years. It's been a huge change.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. People are saying what they do is they condition their hair and then like, wash the rest of their body while it sits there, which I think is interesting. Maybe I should try that.
That's what I've had to start doing because there was so much time to fill. But that gets a little tricky because I've got one of those showers that kind of goes straight down from like above.
Yes.
So it's really tricky to like avoid, get my head to avoid it while washing the rest of my body.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, working on my like limbo skills as I'm also learning how to condition my hair at age 30, apparently.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there you go. So thanks, Kelsey, for teaching us that.
Yeah. I guess these are the sorts of things Kelsey needs to teach Macaulay because you can just go 30 years without learning this.
Yeah. So yeah, the Verona and Avery are heading to Ormland, and on their way they run into the Border Patrol weeknights on 7 Mate, and they try to these folk try to hit the trio with their car, but Verona and Avery are ready to get away from them.
So I just saw a thing like 2 days ago saying they just started filming.
I saw that too.
Yeah. Okay.
On the Australia subreddit. Yeah.
That has to be why Ruben's brought that up. Border
Yeah.
Patrol, great Australian show. If you want like just garbage TV to watch, Border Patrol's top tier garbage. It's about, how would you describe it, Ruben?
Airport stuff.
Yeah,
Airport people catching people at the airport who forget to declare fruits and vegetables in their bags. Basically, is my impression of it.
sometimes drugs. Like sometimes there's interesting stuff, but like
Yeah.
I do that's kind of like I'm partially addicted to the like when there's like a 15-minute segment where they're really interrogating this person. You're like, oh, we've got them now, and they finally like tear into their bag, and we're gonna see what they brought in. It's like some apples or something.
Yeah.
It's
How
just
dare
like,
they? Well, I
and
mean, no. Obviously, our ecological protection stuff is good, but it
yes,
is also quite silly.
yeah, it's one of those things where you're like, I get it, like because then the show will spend 5 minutes reminding you why it is super important that Australia keeps itself isolated from things like that.
Yeah.
But I
But it
do, I
is
do,
very funny.
I do just think it's funny when they hype it up and then it's like some apple seeds and saying, well, okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. Snowdrop has like a fantastic new shirt too. I feel like we've been getting less Snowdrop shirts the last handful of arcs, so I enjoyed Stop Marsupial Appropriation when Verona
Yep.
claimed to be partially nocturnal too. That was funny.
Yeah, good stuff. um, yeah, there's a lot of. So we get into kind of what threatens to be a fight scene here, but never actually quite gets to one, I suppose.
Yeah, well, and it starts with a chat. Like Avery and Verona really are just kind of having a catch up as they're doing this walk. And I don't know. Like I guess I wanted to play this bit where Avery mentions that she wants to get a domain of her own at some point. And specifically, she flags that she thinks Sheridan would be less of a pain in the ass if she could just like set up a domain where she can get into it from wherever and like not have to share a room with Sheridan anymore. I guess, which I was kind of like, I wouldn't make lifelong domain decisions based on needing to get away from your sister for the next 2 years. Like Sheridan's like 16, right? It's only 2 years till hopefully you'll have your own room.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big reason to make it's an interesting reason to make a big decision about a domain.
Well, it's also isn't Avery rich now? Surely she could just like help her mum pay for a bigger house. You know what I mean? Like rent a bigger place in Thunder Bay.
Yeah. yeah, you would think. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I guess I also thought this was funny because it was kind of like like Avery mentions the idea of a domain just to get away from Sheridan, which is kind of a terrible priority thing. But it's also I was like, I wonder what a domain looks like for Avery, because the thing I feel like whenever Avery domains used to come up, everyone mostly latched onto the ideas around like, oh, it'll be
some kind of path domain or something.
Yeah, like connected to the paths, like a way to get in and out of realms quickly. Like we read about those in the domain book, and it was always kind of like, oh, that's probably the sort of thing Avery would do.
But now
that's redundant.
She's got the door boon now. Like basically, the best thing she could do is have her domain be that the door store from that episode of Rick and Morty, the interdimensional cave worm with all the doors, right? Like
or the Monsters Inc. factory.
Or the Monsters Inc. factory, yes, a very good reference as well, Elliot. No, yeah, you're right. In fact, I would love to see the Monsters Inc. factory version of the Garrick HQ. If they, all these doors, like that really makes a lot of sense to me. Interesting.
Yeah, like I guess I don't know. I'm just curious because Avery is this arrivals and departures person who now has a boon that basically means travel just isn't a concern for her anyway. I'm like, what does a domain look like for her? I actually find that a really interesting question because the one part of it that I feel like I kind of had latched onto has just become so moot.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. What would an Avery domain look like?
But yeah, I mean, it's tricky for her right now because she's 14, but I guess like the question that she would essentially be answering if she was looking at this as an adult, I guess, is what does home look like for her? Which is like, I don't know, it feels like an even more loaded question for someone like Avery who can just zip around the world or whatever, because it's in some ways it doesn't matter, which also almost makes it like a trickier decision, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I do love this moment where, because as I said, like in this scene, they're kind of flirting with the idea of this turning into a fight scene, but it never quite gets there. But it does have this moment where they're kind of huddled in a tree, being like, "Oh, we're just being silly. This is probably nothing." And then this car fucking swerves right off the road into them. And it's just such a great immediate escalation of like, boom, this is serious now. It's just good shit.
Yeah, and right from that build up of like the narration mentions another car going past, and you're sort of like, aren't they in the middle of nowhere in Canada? And then Avery's like, that's the same car, and it's sort of like, okay, this is go time, and they start doing plans, and it's like a classic caper, and then the car swerves for them, and you're like, oh, this is a pretty intense caper, and then the darkness spreads out from it. They're in the abyss, and it just goes to like 1,000 from where it was.
Yeah, yeah, it's very fun.
And I guess we've talked a lot about Avery, but to touch on Verona, whose perspective we're in at this point in the story, she starts doing her glamour plan here, making the duplicates of them, and she has this like runaway thought about how Gillette actually being her familiar would have made her even better at glamour stuff, which was funny because she seems pretty capable as is. But I guess it had me thinking about like how core glamour really is to Verona as a practitioner, which I think we've sort of flagged for all three of them when they got kind of cut off from Marisica, and it was like, where are they going to get their glamour now? Because they only get Guilherme's shit tier glamour.
Yeah.
But like, I think for Verona particularly, glamour has always pretty consistently been one of her primary tools. Like if you think about, like, obviously Gillette has become a thing because of that. Transforming into a cat was kind of her go-to at the start of the story. And like, glamour is just magical paint. So like the whole artist thing with her and glamour has been right there the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like the only thing I can think of that comes close to being kind of a Verona core thing would be like magical items that she's like to use, but those always more feel like something she uses as a crutch rather than like something she likes to use, I guess. Or she likes them because she doesn't have to be an active practitioner to use them.
Yeah.
But I guess I just thought this was really interesting because as Verona has like continued to invest in glamour as a kind of foundation of many of the other aspects of her practice, like that really differentiates her from Marisica, who's presumably given it up. Like Marisica has traded in magic paint for the magic
for the blood army. Yeah.
Yeah. And there are obviously lots of parallels between Marisica and Verona earlier on in the story, and I guess this idea that like Verona has really kind of gone all in on glamour and like the artistic side of herself, and beating Easton with it and all that. She's got now like a swatch of different flavors of glamour, whereas Marisica has just gone all in on blood. And I think that'll be like an interesting parallel to maybe see where it goes for the two of them. Like I feel like that's the sort of thing where we'll be able to see part of Marisica's weakness is probably going to be the fact that she's taken that sort of versatility away from herself.
Yeah. Yeah, you'd think. I still feel it's so hard to get a beat on Marcy, though, right? Like, even as we kind of get the sense that defeating her is going to be a part of this story, it still feels like impossible to know what that looks like.
Well, as we see with her army in this, she just feels so much more of a concern than any of the judges, because like the way they're beating the judges at the moment is kind of manipulating these rules, which are very restrictive on them.
Yes.
Like the only reason Charles hasn't just trounced them is because they can take advantage of things like Percival to mean he's tied up.
Yes. But Marcy doesn't have those rules, right?
No,
or that we know of, at least, I guess.
Yeah,
maybe she does, but
we did hear in Arc 8 when Durasha had that the cool like surfer bro god who was healing them.
Yeah.
And there was talk of like how gods are kind of restricted in some ways, so there's probably some stuff to play with there. But it certainly seems like it's a lot less than the judges. Like she has this army, she can point at them. Seemingly she doesn't have to give a fuck anymore about the deal. Since she got expelled from Kennet, I've been assuming she's let off the hook for the awakening promise.
Yeah,
like she doesn't seem to need to protect them or want to give them long lives anymore. Or maybe her soldiers are under strict capture orders, and she's gonna give them a great long life in the abyss or something.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Marcy's army to me is interesting because we don't you don't really get the impression here that they're especially like, organized or like e- even on the same team. You know what I mean? Like, there's this bit. I guess we're jumping ahead a little bit, but there's this bit where they're kind of getting away from the three in the car, and they come across these like creepy school kids, which there's a lot of creepy school kid others, but that kind of vibe. And this creepy school kids, instead of going for them, get kind of intimidated into going for the trio in the car, right?
Right. So my understanding of that was that those sorts of people were just rando
Rando
abyss.
Abyss folks, right? And
Yeah.
not specifically part of Marcy's gang.
No. But in the
Okay.
same way that, like, if you're not in the Vatican but you're somewhere else in Rome, there's probably going to just be a lot of people around who will understand what a cross means, right? Like, and
Yeah.
potentially be religious. But like, I don't. But I think they call out this
Right.
isn't like this isn't Marcy's chunk of the abyss. The abyss. It's maybe just like an adjacent-ish one that she's got. She can push some stuff into, so it's going to kind of
Right.
be like,
Okay.
yeah, a rando part of the abyss with some of her people in it. But like, clearly the cowgirl woman
Is
doesn't
not.
fucking like her.
Yes, for sure.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. I do like how immediately obvious it is that this is Marcy's army. Like the car hits
yeah.
them, and then we immediately get dark blood, and we're like, "Oh, okay. Here's what's going on."
I know. I really like the three fingers on the lips as a kind of religious
Yeah.
symbol. Like
Yeah.
fingers on lips being Marcy's religious thing is very fun. I really enjoy that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't wait to see even more of those. But yeah,
Mm.
I guess coming back to what we're talking about, yeah, just with Marissa, it kind of seems like she's going to be the scariest thing to deal with, and I don't know how they will, but I just the more we see Verona really commit to all practices, but very specifically glamour as a kind of artistic foundation for it, the more I really feel like Marissa having given that form of creation up for another is going to be something that shoots her in the butt.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. Should we talk about this cowgirl? Because they get out of the
Yeah.
forest abyss after a brief run-in with this cool cowgirl. It's just interesting vibes of like abyss, random, monstrous folks. The cowgirl and her dog. Like, I don't know. It's just fun. I like it. Seems like a fun place to be.
Yeah, it does give you that vibe of like, I can think of other realms like this from TV shows and novels and stuff where it's just like mega zombie apocalypse vibes. Like anything here could kill you. Like this cowgirl's sort of like, okay, you say you're against Mariska, like what, but you have to leave. Like she can't, this isn't the post-apocalypse where she can just be like, oh, come in for tea or whatever, the enemy of my enemy sort of vibe. Like everything seems kind of hostile. Like I can see why people thought this place was hell.
Mm.
That's still the one big abyss fact that I'm holding on to that we got early in the story was people thought it was hell. And I'm like, this was our first glimpse of it. I'm kind of like, you know what? I see it.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It gives that vibe. Especially the bogged downness, right? Like that's
Yes.
yeah.
I thought that was particularly fun too because almost every other realm we've seen in the story has been about making travel easier in certain ways. Like you can zip through the spirit world and like through empty places, or if you've got enough willpower, the ruins has been used for fast travel. I forget what the technomancy realm is called, but like the digital aether. You can zip along power lines and stuff. The paths, obviously, like almost every realm we've seen in the story has been like about making travel easier, and the abyss is like, no, it fucking bogs you down, and
Yeah.
like that they travel like a kilometer and it maps to like 50 meters in the real world or something.
Well,
Like it
the
just,
ruins also was a bit of a drag in that way, wasn't it? But not to the same extent.
well, I guess, but the ruins I think has been set up to be contextual. Like it depends how you're traveling through the ruin. Maybe it does apply to the abyss too. But like I feel like the ruins was introduced as travel can be harder or can be easier depending on. Yeah, sorry. So yeah, I don't know. Like maybe there is a fast way through the abyss or something, but it just so far it kind of seems like its theme is bog you down, and I think that's really interesting. Like compared to all the other realms we've seen.
Yeah, the thing that jumps out to me is quite interesting is Verona mentions and kind of thinks about how the abyss gets its hooks in them very easily without even really getting them at all, right? Like they get kind of sent to this proto abyss adjacent area with this car crashing into not them, and like the trio doesn't ever really seem to even see them or like get them. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's
Yeah.
just some random border crew. They along a big set of border people that gets them without even really getting them, and just like immediately sends them. Like if they actually had seen them and Marisuke's attention was actually on them, it would have been so much worse. It feels crazy.
Yeah, like to the point where I'm almost like, maybe the Abyss is kind of easy come, easy go with how much it gets its hooks into you, because like so many other realms in this story, it's been like a pain in the ass to get into them, and they get sucked into the Abyss so easily here.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah, either that.
scary.
Yeah, but this is the terrifying thing. Marisuke's fucking got seemingly the whole province covered. Like, yeah, they've let this army get so big. It's terrifying.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, they arrive in the Orum's territory, or so they think. The Orum has evaded them, and instead somebody else shows up. The
Ah,
Exalt role. Yeah.
this is so good though, isn't it? Like, I can't believe I didn't consider this as an option for like, especially the arc title In Absentia. But like, of course, Ryan would just kind of find a way not to be at the meeting where he's going to be held accountable for shit. Like, that's so him. Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, it's there's this real sinking feeling as soon as they kind of get there and it's not what they expect it to be and they can't seem to, chat to the Aurum. It's yeah, this like bottom dropping out moment. It's great.
Yeah, well, especially because then they start kind of trying to force it by yelling like, "Hey, we did the rules. Come see us. You have to." Um, and eventually that amounts in like somebody else showing up, and it's a real like, what the fuck is happening? Like mic drop moment as we move into a Lucy section. Like this is what I love about dot all chapters like this. It's just the way you sort of like when you don't know it's a dot all chapter, which is the best kind. You're sort of like thinking you're in a Verona chapter and you're trying to follow Verona's journey in the chapter, and so something like this happens, and then you get completely sidelined by like, forget all that, we're doing Lucy now. It's always a fun surprise.
Yeah, yeah. It is fun to just have a cut to Lucy here.
Well, it's like a mid-chapter cliffhanger. That's such a fun thing to
Yeah,
do.
yeah. So yeah, we cut back to Lucy, who is in the midst of negotiating more moot points. At the core being the awakening of children, I guess.
Yeah, and there's this bit where like grandfather starts to get kind of in amongst it, and all the stuff comes up about like Yolda and Charles, and Charles is a bit like, is this really what you want to raise as an issue right now? And grandfather's like, I want to raise this as an issue several times per hour, but I suppose we can talk about other shit. I just loved that. I was like, way to carry on John's spirit, I guess, of just never letting Charles forget that that's what he did.
Yeah, yeah. It's good stuff. I love. There's this great bit where Anne asks, "How many years am I expected to wait?" And Anthem says, "Your daughter, you mean?" And it's a great moment of Anthem being like, "No, remember, I've learned very recently, children aren't just extensions of their parents." It's like good dad Anthem is here to stay, and it's great.
Yeah, I hadn't really processed that to that level. I'm really glad you called that out, because you're right. That's a really important moment for reinforcing how much he's actually kind of accepted what Kenneth Found has been trying to teach him, that like, you got to listen to your fucking kids.
Yeah.
I'm just so I'm so worried Anthem's going to backslide now, because I've completely forgiven him. Like he's so flipped in my head. I'm just like,
You're
wait.
already on board with Team Anthem.
Well, because he was already so close. Like, this was the resounding thing with all the Teds, mostly America and Anthem, but it was always this thing where it was like, you guys are so close to being cool. You just keep doing one or two little things wrong. And like Anthem, in that big argument he had with, I think it was Lucy, I don't know, but where he, it was like when we first really met him, and it was for Verona's domain claim, and it was a bit like he was so close. He was just missing a few small things, and it feels like he's learned them, and I'm just so on board now, and he's making up for it. And I'm like, I'm just setting myself up for disappointment when he backslides even a little bit.
Yeah, I don't think he will. I think he's flipped around. He's turned it around, and he's unambiguously good now.
He's better. He got better. Speaking of got better, Anne and Deb are here, and I love this bit where Lucy sort of challenges Anne on the concept of like awakening ages by bringing up like, well, what happens if you wanted to awaken your daughter at 3 years old or whatever?
Mm.
And Deb tries to bring up that that's clearly a straw man argument, and just steamrolls past it and goes, "Well, if she was good enough to be awoken at 3, I totally would have done it. So yeah." Uh, just just this moment where Deb's like, "Oh, fucking never mind." Then Anne's apparently cool with it. Like I just love their vibes so much.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. They are very fun.
Yeah, I don't have anything to say at this point except for just it's funny.
Yeah. It is good. This is just kind of a good, fun intermediate, right? This bit with Lucy is like the fun part of the chapter in my mind.
Which is so funny that like the mood is going well enough that it's kind of the
It's
like,
like comedic, yeah.
well, it's the gap in the middle of the chapter to kind of make us feel a bit more optimistic and remember things aren't that bad.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I love this bit in this chapter where basically every time Lucy says something, we get a bit of her looking over to Kira Lynn, who is staring daggers at her. And eventually we get to the bit where she suggests that this is going to impact um, the Negateers and they're going to need to decide if they're in or not. And we get this line, if looks could kill, Kira Lynn was trying to take it a step further and add a slew of other horrific crimes to the list. It's just it's such a great payoff to this setup throughout this part of the chapter of how angry Kira Lynn is at Lucy.
Yeah, and I think my favorite thing about it is like 100% that's a look Lucy has given to other people in the story too. Like especially about like like this is an aspect that I think Kira Lynn and Lucy share is that like absolute drive and like belief in justice and hatred of people who are unjust. They just have different definitions of what it should look like, but they kind of share that ferocity. So I love hearing this from Lucy in particular because I'm like, well, Lucy of all people would know what that look feels like on the other end, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, true. That's a good point. And then, of course, Charles has a few great moments in this section as well.
Yeah, I really like his speech on his contempt here too, like because he in arc 13 Ray gave us his whole thing about how Charles wasn't just angry anymore, he was resentful, and you can't really cure resentment as easily. Like anger is something you can get over. Resentment has, once it's planted root, it's pretty indestructible. And Charles here I guess makes the case for having risen out of resentment by going down further and going into full on content, which is just like fuck you all so much that I'm just going nuclear. Like, you know, it's sort of, it makes sense that this is what resentment plus drive turns into is contempt. And, you know, he's the Carmine now. So that's what's happened. And like, he basically full on says, like, they're like, tell us why you've awoken these kids the way that you have. And he doesn't really even answer the question except just to say, I fucking hate you all so much that I'm just doing it because I want to hurt you. Um, like, you know, he doesn't try to justify any sort of grander plan or anything. He's just like,
Yeah,
what you hate is that this is happening to you because this is what you do to everyone else.
yeah. It's it's so crazy to be like kind of on Charles's side at some of these points. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like kind of liking Charles again.
Yeah, but again, like this has always been. I feel like the thing that's always really just separated Charles from the Kennetys is whether the means justify the ends, essentially. And Charles here is just kind of making the case for, I tried gainsaying your kids to protect them, didn't work. You made things worse, so I'm just kind of going for, if you can't beat them, join them. And I'm just going to do raids and be evil, and you started it.
Yeah.
He leaves himself wiggle room. Like there could be something going on, and he just kind of expertly didn't answer the question by focusing on that angle of it. But I don't know. That could be getting a bit tinfoily. What he implies in this manifesto here is that really he's just doing it to throw a tantrum and burn everything down. And so it's really no surprise that Kira Lynn is the face of the other side in this segment when you think about
it. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Charles, what a guy. flawless character. We cut back to Verona and Avery, who have now realized the rules of the game that they're playing, and start playing.
Yeah. But before they start playing, they fully meet Exalt Wrought in Abundance, which is just a cool name for a fucking cool character. Even just like from a bit more of a meta level, it's very funny that this really disappointing, hurtful setback is them meeting a spirit of exaltation. Like that's just a funny move from the Aurum. I appreciate that.
Mm.
But she's also just really cool. Like she seems really chill. As soon as she kind of realizes that she's being played a bit here or being used as a pawn in another game, she's really chill with the Kenneteers. She's like, "Hey, you guys do you. I have no problem with you."
Yeah, they do seem very chill.
And I'm fascinated by this knowledge that she's the lord of a spirity area, which it seems like, different, but kind of the same to like, say being the lord of a city or something in Ontario, right? It seems like a lordship very specifically limited to the spirit realm, maybe.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And like we get a glimpse, this fucking Nox S style one shot look at this grand city or realm that she's like the lord of, and then it kind of goes away. And I'm like, well, no, hold on, we need like a Pate style come to tourist visit this place, please. I want to know what these spirit world fortresses are like.
Yeah, that would be fun actually. Too many places that we want to visit in this world, huh?
Yeah, classic fucking Otherverse. Just one throwaway line, something that could just be a whole story if we needed it to be.
Yeah. I do really love the way that the vibe of them figuring out the rules of the game they're playing with Yoram here works. Like, I've been referring to it as a game, and obviously it's not. It's kind of a trick that the Yoram is using to avoid them, but also just like, it does kind of feel like a contest that they've kind of entered into. It's not the Aurum contest, but it does feel like an Aurum contest in a weird way. And I really love the way that it kind of feels so natural.
So yeah, this feels like a board game. Like Avery sort of explains, oh, we can loop around things to take them. And I was like, oh, I definitely feel like I've played something like this. Where you draw loops to claim territory.
Yeah.
You're right. And like this is the whole thing. I know I've seen some like speculation in the fandom about how much this is like the start of an Aurum contest that they're being trickily dragged into, because it's kind of like there's almost no way that the Aurum and Charles didn't account for the Kenneteers figuring this part out. It seems wild to me that they would assume that the Kenneteers would just stop here. So this has to be something that turns into more of a thing, I guess. And yeah, I guess I'm just interested to see where that game goes. But like it does start to the theories that this is like the start of an Aurum contest or something totally track for me.
Yeah. It's just like, because we were kind of talking about before the contest that the Aurum might be kind of amenable to just supporting them, right?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think, like, could this be a way to give them a leg up in the upcoming contest without, being too overt about it to Charles? I don't know.
Yeah, it is hard to read, because the other thing, I think I talked about this more on Discord than in the episode, but like, something I tried to come back to was the thing we've been told a lot is that judges do get a little bit stuck in the mode that they were in when they took the judgeship, right? Like we used to hear that a lot in the context of like the Carmine Beast. And I guess I was thinking like Ryan, we saw him kind of go and take the throne in his interlude, and it was very much he was on the run, he was cheating, he was, cutting corners, abusing systems. This kind of feels on par with that. Like maybe he is just still someone who's a bit stuck in like avoidance mode. And like, he will cheat and do so, and like, because he ended up cornered in the way he got into the taking the judgeship was his final escape hatch. Like his cheating and stuff backed him into a corner, and then he had to pull the emergency switch. And so I guess the question now is, if the Kenneteers start taking up space, does he get cornered again and have to pull some extra emergency switch.
Mm.
Or he could very well be trying to do a play here. Like, I think what's fun about this is so far I don't think we can confidently come down either way. I think this fits his like stuck in judgeship MO as much as it fits his like turncoat sneaky MO.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it's hard to really attribute too much to it.
Yeah. I'm seeing people call out that it's Splatoon, as the game, where you're taking territories. And I don't think, because in Splatoon you don't get like a loop if you cover the whole thing. That would be OP in Splatoon. Like Splatoon was more like when the Turtle Queen, Monty, and Father Gobar.
Yeah.
That battle was more Splatoon. Like if it was Splatoony, it'd be like I'd just go get the Turtle Queen. But this feels more like I don't know, Risk or something, but not Risk.
Cathedral. There's a board game called
Yes.
Cathedral where you mark territories.
I was thinking Cathedral, but there's something about the way it kind of all fills in when you do the loop, which I swear I've played like fucking more like agar.io or whatever. You know those games?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't Go like which one's Go?
Go's
Go
the one
game.
with the
Isn't that the one with the little
pieces?
dots?
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's only ever along one axis or something. No, maybe Go is kind of what I'm thinking. I feel like there's something else. I'm going to go pull out that like 51 Clubs games on Switch. I think it's something else.
Anywho.
It's probably very, very similar to
Go. Yeah, so that sets up for what is presumably going to be next chapter. I don't know. I haven't read it yet.
Well, everyone in our chat has been saying 21.14 is very exciting. So I'm assuming that my guess here in the notes is correct and that it is in fact Jasmine and Anthem's wedding.
Yes, that's the other obvious thing that it could be.
Because that would be hype. No, I mean, sorry, I guess the other thing before we do head out, there's a talk right at the end here where Verona brings up the way the Kennet duos all kind of function. And I just wanted to shout this out because I really like this idea, and it feels like something we've touched on before, but like as always, Wildbow and Verona are able to crystallize it a lot better than I ever could. Which is like you can really see how when each Kennetier, because each of the Kennetiers kind of has two sides of Kennet that they like and one side that they don't like so much. And when they get in their duos, they kind of align around the one that they both like. So with like Verona and Lucy, their overlap Kennet is the Undercity, and you can kind of see how that manifests as that kind of all-out, over the top, aggressive sort of side that they have when they pair up. Whereas Avery and Lucy are the kind of Kennet above, and so that manifests as like trying to help people and do good and stuff, which is what Kennet above is in an ideal world. And then Avery and Verona together are the kind of Kennet found, the like pathy bit out in the middle of nowhere sort of duo. And I really liked that model for thinking about it. I feel like it's something that I'd processed subconsciously but not consciously, and I love sort of having the story point that out so you can be like, oh yeah, I really do see like how those pairings map like that. It's just really fun.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, as Verona said, it's so fitting that now they're entering, they're playing a board game. And it's like, well, of course it had to be those two doing it.
Yeah, it fits their vibes. So yeah, that's the end of our chapter discussion for this week. But of course, we've still got a few other things to go through, like our predictions / comments. Comments and predictions left by people either in the Reddit threads or in our Pale Predictor form, which you can find linked in the show notes down below.
Yes. So, Ruben, why don't you go first? Because your one's a lot bigger and I think more serious than mine.
Sure. Well, my prediction is from Jonaleth, who points out the foreshadowing of the first thing that Verona being changed into was turning into a small furry animal like a weasel or a stoat, which Lucy assumes is a mink, but actually Jonaleth theorizes was a sable, and hence this was foreshadowing for Verona becoming the sable at some point in the story. Jonaleth says at the end of the story. Jonathan doesn't know yet how that all connects or how it connects to Marcy, all this stuff, but I really do think it's a cool pull and if a cool kind of marker of some potential foreshadowing. So it's wild and it doesn't, the steps to get from A to B aren't quite there yet, but it is a good call out. So yeah.
That's what Pale Predictor's here for.
Mm.
I had no idea there was an animal called a sable. I'm just Googling about it now. I didn't know that was a thing. This is cool. They get up
Yeah.
to 1 kilogram big.
Yeah.
They have a gestation period of 245 to 298 days. Why is Google telling me this first? Anyway.
That's just the important info.
Yeah, I don't know. I would be bummed at any ending that sees one of the Kenneteers taking a judgeship. But that said, the Sable is still the judgeship that I am the most murky on,
Yes.
so maybe we'll learn more of it. I could be like,
Yeah.
oh, I can see it.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, a couple of arcs ago, I think the two of us were calling out for a fun arc where Verona gets forsworn and has to go to Charles, so, like, can't really criticize another theory for being too grim an ending for Verona. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've pulled out a prediction from Gisso, who thinks there might be an attempt to match Tiny Ann Wint with Easton Sonjate or Sol Ferguson by one or more of the terrible parents that have been brought up in the moot.
What about the Oni practitioners? Why don't they get a reference here?
Well, they have nobody to spruik for them. Yeah, I just brought this up because I thought the horror comedy of somebody trying or this moot turning into people doing arranged marriages is very funny to me.
Yeah, yeah. It would be quite funny. And Lucy would be so against it as well.
Yeah.
But also it would be like, you know, against the idea of using this moot to arrange a marriage from the parents. But also then like, you know, if it's Easton and Anne, like little Anne, it's kind of like, you know, Lucy's going to be like, oh, I hate the concept of arranged marriages, but I really don't give a shit about these two in particular.
See, the thing I keep coming back to with Easton is that it's like, he's another one. He's kind of like Anthem, where it's like, if he could just stop being himself for 5 minutes, he seems like he's actually pretty cool. You know what I mean? Like, he had that friend who talked to Biscuit, the alchemist kid. I can't remember his name. But like the thing that's so funny about Easton is I think there is a really cool person hiding in there. They're buried so deep right now. They're under a lot of rubble. But like I'm really clinging on to that fact, like what Verona mentioned about how Easton, his knights and stuff are built with really good craftsmanship. And, you know, like they had their art contest, but so you can see a world where Easton and Verona are actually able to like coordinate and like do stuff together, and then he can work with everyone else. He just needs to stop being himself. And Tiny Ann Wint would probably be the opposite of that for him.
Yeah.
But that's why Easton's so fun to dunk on, because it's just very much the outer layer of his personality that is what is detestable about him.
Yeah, I don't know. I keep going back to that bit. I can't remember. Was it his interlude? I guess it was his interlude, wasn't it? With the fucking replaced doll. And fuck, just how much of a piece of shit he was about that whole thing. Like, that's just, you know, he's just a piece of shit.
But he could.
You're
not
such
be.
an Eastern apologist, Elliot. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Good predictions from Jonathan Jaso. So thank you, folks. Should we get into our discussion question, Elliot?
Yes. So last week we asked everyone, what agenda item would you bring to the moot, and have the Kenneteers missed anything?
Yeah. Which ones did you really like here? I think an interesting one was from Fancy Swamp, who raised the concept of the binding of others and like trying to ban the binding of others as a kind of flat ban, which is really interesting because I think they're like the thing that makes that a quirk to me is because I feel there should be exceptions, like, you know, Bjorgman, right, is top of the mind immediately there of someone that should be bound.
this is the thing, like practitioners became a thing for a reason, right? Like when
Yes,
the seal was
exactly
brought
right.
up,
Exactly
there
right.
are big monstrous others who need to be stopped. It's just like we're so far from where the seal was written that it's easier to focus on the abuse, which it should be. But it's like, yeah, like, and especially like keeping in mind that these are the combat practitioners. I think the combat practitioners as the frontline people fighting stuff like this goblin queen who keeps coming up in the story, Gerhild or something, like
Yeah.
the breastbiter's boss.
Yeah.
That feels like somebody who you send all the combat practitioners to beat the fuck out of, right? So it's like, yeah, like I guess I don't know, like you know, you do need rules and stuff, but like particularly when we're keeping in mind that this is just the combat practitioners, I think it's interesting to think about what system you might put in place to be like, okay, no, these are the people who we send all the combat practitioners at to, you know, fuck right up.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting. Of course, any rule that has exceptions means there's an exploitation of who gets to decide what the exceptions are, right? And that's basically effectively getting us back to how practitioners operate now, really.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's a really interesting rule, and but one that's like, I don't know, yeah, how do you actually do it in a way that is not just shit?
Yeah. And I think a big part of that comes back to what Miss mentioned to Lucy as they were getting started, which is like just never set anything in stone so it can't be edited because you
Yes,
like
yes,
it's a classic over optimization move to try and create a set of rules at the start that can't be bent.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
situations will change, people will find a way. It's like you've got to make rules that can bend back.
yes,
Um, uh, and I guess kind of touching on a similar note, like this is what Captain Rhino brought up as well, which is well, so they mentioned that a big part of what seems to fall to judges is the overseeing of creation of new others. So, like, is there a way to get the combat practitioners to have policies around that? Uh,
mm,
which I thought was interesting. I mean, they mentioned that's probably not something for this moot, but for a couple of moots later, because you wouldn't want the current chuckle fox deciding, you know, what what sort of others come up. But I do like this idea of that is a big a big thing for Charles, and I can kind of see the power in sort of saying I don't know, like if the combat practitioners have some sort of jurisdiction to say, okay, these are the sorts of energies we want to focus on for random others to pop up.
mm,
I don't know if that's something they can get jurisdiction on, but like it would be
yeah.
an interesting one to try.
Yeah, it I don't know if it would work, would it? But yeah,
Yeah.
um, yeah. I really liked Propaganda Pagoda's answer about trying to diversify groups in this world so that they aren't in such open conflict. Like, um, others aware, witch hunters, innocents, whatever else, right? Like, um, there was a question raised in response to Propaganda Pagoda of like how would this be a moot thing, and Pagoda's answer was kind of like, well, maybe it can start with like a a bonus to your combat scores if you've got a diverse team kind of vibes, which I think is a good idea. Yeah, I just think it's kind of cool, a cool idea if it could be made to work out. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so like Lucy brought the others in and kind of gave them a presence, and I think it'd be interesting to take what Propaganda Pagoda is saying and like expand that to being like yeah, like the witch hunters and like giving more of a voice. Like so, I guess taking others and making them equal members of this moot alongside the practitioners, and then doing the same. Yeah, two witch hunters, other aware. There's talk of innocence, which I guess might be Louise-ish people. I don't know, but like, um, yeah, I guess the idea of like making these moots something that practitioners are just one arm of, feels like what Propaganda Pagoda might be getting at. And I think that is a really interesting idea. Like,
Mm,
probably a hard sell on some of the practitioners who are very, uh, not practitioner centric, but practitioner superior. Um,
yeah.
but like, it definitely seems like the sort of thing Kennet would want to do. Look at
Mm.
their own council. Like, basically, the Kennet Council, but with the moots is essentially, I guess, what I'm pitching.
Yeah, I think that tracks. I think like it'd be good. I don't know. I
Yeah,
mean, I feel like we've been trying to find the right way to express this in a flawless system, and it just is not quite perfect. But
yeah.
a way to make this system without any obvious problems, and we haven't quite got it. But this council vibe is probably pretty close.
Yeah, well, so essentially, my understanding of the moot is it represents the idea that, like, if we just get everyone together and we agree on stuff, we can kind of handle it before it defaults to one all-powerful guy who could be a
Yes.
dickhead.
Yes.
So it's essentially trying to add democracy specifically on Carmine stuff. And for me, it just seems like there's always going to be gaps in what you're covering there unless you start to bring in things like the witch hunters, who have specifically been brought up as a gap that, as a wrinkle that formed because there's a gap in stuff.
Mm. Yeah.
So like adding the witch hunters to this at some point almost feels like a no-brainer to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so too.
So
With
I also wanted to call out Megafire Seven's answer, who, as you know, in retrospect, we might have expected. Megafire wanted more expansion on the idea of like not just what age do we awaken kids, but Megafire wants to see even more about like what you can and can't do, which you're basically defining like rules to avoid abuse, like kind of a universal declaration of combat practitioner child rights. So stuff like no sending them to torture camps in Italy, as an example, was something Megafire pitched. But yeah, just some, it's hard to come up with rules that completely shut down abuse of all kinds without being too restrictive. But just there's got to be some general stuff or some systems you can put in place to stop or make it a lot harder, at least, for combat practitioners to abuse their kids.
Yeah, it's a pretty good thing for us to try and have.
Yeah,
I
that's a good
think
point.
speaking on kind of Geneva Convention stuff, Rid Tom had some similar lines of like, yeah, effectively limiting how bad things can get with some kind of Geneva Convention vibes, right? Like no bloodline extinction, no slavery, like some
Yeah.
unwritten rules for dealing with big threats, you might call them. But yeah, this kind of stuff of like limiting how bad practitioner conflict can get.
Yeah, I really liked Rid Tom's point about like just trying to have systems in place as well for dealing with the big threats. Um, because that was the good part of Bristow's plan. Like I remember that was the part of Bristow's plan where the Kennedys were like, okay, well, we could see ourselves being part of this if X, Y, Z. So sort of recreating that here, I'm fully on board with. I reckon.
Yeah, yeah. I think so. Beleg Tal gives us a good answer. Flag, theme song, mascot. Hell yeah.
Yeah. So I guess this is the the combat for this province, like combat practitioner for this province's mascot, theme song, and flag. Which
Yeah.
that would be very fun. I mean, Cherry's got to be the mascot though, right? Like everybody loves Cherry. She's a little combat goblin.
Yep. 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 Was that all of them? Were there any others that we missed?
I want to call it Duo Nem.
Oh yes.
Who basically, to paraphrase and summarize their answer, basically their argument was bring back practitioner responsibility for innocence, which I was like, yeah, good point. That is what they're meant to fucking do. Like, and this touches on something Rid Tom brought up as well, which is that like, Rid Tom brought up like the murder and stuff, having that karmic penalty to, where it drags in the innocent law thing. So if you murder someone as a combat practitioner, the law might more easily get involved, and that feels tied into what Duoneb's talking about, which is just like, hey, make sure that they're more integrated into innocent sort of stuff.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good call. That's what they should be.
Yeah, sorry, Percival as the mascot for the anti-Carmine Moot Club is actually, I really love that. Imagine
that
the
is a
Hennigers.
good call.
Imagine the Hennigers having to fly a flag with Percival on
it. Yeah, I like it. Now, of course, we've got another discussion question for this week, Elliot, around the topic of awakening children. The question is, when and how would you awaken your children? How young, as well as, practically, what would it look like? How would you go about it?
Yeah, and yeah, like I'm sure a lot of people have like systems for this. Like I doubt many people are going to be like, when they hit 9, they're getting awakened. Like so, like I'm interested to see what attributes a child would have to demonstrate for somebody to be like, yes, my child is ready to be awakened.
Yeah. There's I'm interested to see, when do people think is the right way to do this? If there has to be a right way, 3 years old is the answer, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, if they're good enough and did qualify,
But
makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah, you can leave your answers to that discussion question in our discussion thread linked in the show notes down below. So check out that thread for where to leave your discussion question answers, or just discuss the show in general, or find links to things like our Pale Predictor form where you can leave your predictions.
Yes, don't forget to check us out on Twitter at Power Reflectcast. We're also, obviously on Discord too. If you want to catch that live recording with me and Jenny next week, doofmedia.com/Discord has the invite link.
Yeah. And you can obviously, while you're on the Doof Media website, check out all the other great things on the Doof Media network, the other great shows on the Doof Media network, including, Jenny and Malia's shows, but also other shows.
Well, Kingslingers, I think, just did their season 2 finale, and they're starting on their third and final season. So now is as good a time as any to go check in what they're about to do and read along and join in.
Yeah, get some King slung at you if you're into that kind of thing, I suppose. If you appreciate the work that we do at the Doof Media Network, remember we are entirely Patreon funded, so you can support us doing what we do by heading to patreon.com/Doof Media and supporting us making these shows.
Yes, and don't forget to support Wildbow at patreon.com/Wildbow. He's writing this story, and we need him to keep writing it. So keep giving him money for it.
Damn right.
It's that simple.
Yeah. And with that, we'll catch you next time, folks. Thanks for joining us.
See ya.